Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And would you please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Pinnick, would you call roll call for us, please?
Mayor Pape. Councilmember Shavetta.
Here.
Councilmember Hands.
Here.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Here.
Councilmember Leahy.
Here.
Councilmember Neal. Councilmember Ryder.
Here.
Councilmember Silvers.
Here.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Here.
Thank you. So our first item today is public items, and I have a script to read. Members of the public are encouraged to use this time to make comments about matters that do not appear on the agenda. Comments about items on the regular agenda will be taken as each item is considered. Please note, individuals making public comments will be limited to 5 minutes. In accordance with the governing body rules of procedure, the city reserves the right to refuse public comments that are personal, impertinent, or slanderous. I did receive the sheet, but the 3 people who signed up out in the lobby are all wanting to talk about trash haulers, and that is on the agenda, so we'll not entertain those public comments at this point. Are there any other public comments? Seeing no one stepping forward, we'll go forward. This is really echoing to me, so something is too loud.
It doesn't sound echoey from here.
Oh, lovely. We're all learning. All right, the first item this evening is the consent agenda. All items listed under the heading are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. There are no separate discussions of these items unless a council member so requests, in which case that item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Does anyone wish to remove any of the items, either of the items? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Yes, Mr. Silvers.
Miss Interim Mayor, I would like to move that the council approve consent agendas item 1 and 2.
Is there a second? Ms. Yodrich?
Councilmember, I second.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands. Aye. Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. I thought we might have a mayor's report, but we do not have something from Mayor Pape. I do have a list of some of the things that I know governing body members have attended since the last meeting on August 12th. I'm not going to list every single name, but after I'm through, if you have additional items, please let me know that. Several of us went to City Hall Selfie Day, which was really a lovely event. There were a couple who attended concert in the courtyard. The Shawnee Mission School District Luncheon, several people, I believe, attended that. The agenda-setting meeting included Ms. Yodrich, Mayor Pape, myself, and Mr. Engel. I had the privilege of attending the Inspiring Women in Public Administration Conference, with several staff members, and it was the 50th anniversary of that event. It was very inspiring, actually. I also understand that Ms. Yodrich and Mr. Engel attended the KC 2026 World Cup briefing at Union Station, and I'm sure they're going to have a lot more information and opportunities for involvement for all of us. So that's what is on my list. Are there additional events that people represented us? Yes,
I attended the first Citizens Academy meeting.
very good. Yes,
I also attended a very important event. I went to the National Lemonade Day lemonade stand at the community center.
oh,
It was
wow.
delicious.
Anyone else? Well, thank you so much for connecting with the community and beyond the community. Our next item is a planning commission item. Mr. Dyer.
Oops. Good evening, council. As Brian Dyer, Community Development Director, give me a second here to get this set up. All right. This evening, for your consideration from your planning commission area, had one item that you acted on. That was the plat that was in the consent agenda. These next two items are related, so I'm going to present them together. So if you have any questions about either one of them, I'd be happy to answer them. Also, make note that the applicant representative for this project is here as well, so he is here to answer any questions that you may have also. What you have before you this evening is a preliminary development plan and plat for property that is located at 10270 West 75th Street. That is at the northeast corner of 75th and Schweitzer. It's up here on the screen. I'll zoom in just a little bit closer there for you. I think we're all pretty familiar with the site. It's been around for quite a bit of time. And the development plan that's before you this evening, the request is to add back in a fueling station and a canopy into the parking lot that is located here in front of the building. A little bit of history about this building. This property previously in the early 80s was the U-Haul facility. It did a number of rentals out of it. And then in 1985, the city council approved a rezoning of the property from commercial C2 to planning and development general. And with that approval also, there was a preliminary development plan that was approved with it as well. That preliminary development plan showed the development of this building as it is configured now, as well as two fueling stations and a canopy that were located out here in the main parking lot area. The development plan showed this portion of the building that has you can see is a black roofing, showed that as being retail, banking uses, and then the portion here on the west side that was, it's got the white roofing on it, that was shown as a 7-Eleven. Property after the 1985 approval was constructed pretty much as the way you see now. It operated as a 7-Eleven and a convenience store along with a couple other different businesses on the other side till 2003, at which time in 2003 the fuel tanks, fueling stations, and canopies were all removed, and the property had a new property owner. So with the new property owner, there was a variety of retail uses that went through the property over the number of years. And really, there wasn't much activity from the city council or planning commission perspective until 2020, at which time a final development plan was submitted and approved to change this area back into a restaurant facility, as well as stripe a number of parking spaces out in the main parking area. That was approved and the parking lot was striped. However, the then property owner did not go forward with developing it as a restaurant. So that brings it up to current day. The current property owner and the applicant, MAK Retail, who owns the property, has already leased out the portion of the retail area to the right there, or to the east, that's got the black roofing over, to a couple of users, and they're looking to put in a convenience store back into where the 7-Eleven was originally located. And also with that, they are requesting to put in 3 fueling stations, and I'll go through that, three or 2 fueling stations here in just a second, but 3 fueling stations back into the property. I am going to touch real quick, because this is a good place to do it, with this illustration up here on the plat. The plat for the property combines these 2 parcels. It has perimeter easements on there. One of the big things on there, you can see this little jut out of property that we have right away here, but then it goes back up to private property. Down here for Schweitzer Avenue, we have the city required 30 feet of right of way from the center line. Up here in this location, it's only 20 feet of right of way. So with the plat, the applicant will be dedicating the additional 10 feet of right of way for Schweitzer to get us to a complete 30 feet of right of way from the center line. Obviously, to the west, or to this side, is developed as office. That is Shawnee. To the south is Overland Park, and is developed with retail uses. And then to the north and east is obviously Merriam, and it has office uses that have already been developed in that area. One of the things I do want to point out is that the property is zoned plan unit development general, so it is zoned for commercial. The uses that are currently in there and proposed uses that are in there are allowable uses per the zoning. So this isn't a conversation about zoning. It's a conversation about the development plan meeting the standards that are within the Merriam Code. A couple other things before I jump into the actual development plan. The applicant, there is no increase in impervious surface, so there wasn't a requirement for the submittal of a stormwater master plan. And the applicant did provide a traffic impact study, a TIS study with this. That impact study showed was that 75th and Schweitzer operates at a level of C currently, level of service C, and the anticipation is that if this area was developed per the development plan, it would still maintain that level of operation of C. It did say that, and again, I'll cover that here in a little bit more in depth just a second, that the right in, right out that's being proposed for the the 75th Street intersection, with that connection to 75th Street will operate at a better level than it currently does right now, because obviously eliminating left turns really helps with traffic management. So going through the development plan, this is a development plan that was submitted to your planning commission. Again, the building is right here. There's no plans, or this plan does not include any reconfiguration or additions to the building. The main feature that we see is these 3 fueling stations that are located out front. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but one of the concerns staff had with this was the reduction of parking. We calculated the parking requirements to be 38 spaces. The development plan only provides 35 spaces. So one of the recommended conditions of approval for this is to remove one of the fueling stations. Prior to the planning commission meeting, just very much, pretty much the day before the planning commission meeting, the applicant did provide a revised development plan that shows the removal of that fueling station, which is what I have up there on the screen. Again, that wasn't considered by your planning commission, because that's not what they received for the packet. However, I think it is important to show that if the city council did approve the development plan with the recommended condition, this is generally what the configuration would be. As you can see, it only has 2 fueling stations and a field of parking over here to the east of it. These area right here is the actual tanks that will be in the ground tanks. So with that, I think it's important to know, 1, what the configuration would look like, and then 2, that the applicant does agree to and has agreed to reducing the number of fueling stations from 3 to 2. So a little bit more on the development plan. A couple of items to note. Again, here's the canopy structure that they're proposing to build in the parking lot area. They also will be putting in a trash enclosure. It will be located in the northeast portion of the property. Currently, right now, there is no trash enclosure. It's simply a dumpster that's placed back there. So that obviously be an enhancement and improvement on the looks of the facility. And then, while it may be a little bit tough to see on your screen, There is an extensive amount of landscaping that we're planning to put in there. You can see all the green. That is exactly what that is. That will be landscaping. Currently, and I think this is a pretty good illustration, if you look down here in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a minimum amount of landscaping on the site. So with this development plan, they will be doing a significant enhancement in the landscaping on there. You also see right here, the right in, right out that the applicant has also agreed to. Again, improve traffic management for 75th Street. And there's also a number of other improvements that the applicant proposes to make. This is a retaining wall. If you're familiar with it right now, it has a chain link fence that's a little bit long in the tooth. They will be replacing that chain link fence with a wrought iron fence. They will also be removing a non-conforming pole sign is located right here. This will be getting rid of that pole sign, in addition to the other benefits that I mentioned, dedicating a full amount of right-of-way for Schweitzer, landscaping improvements right in and right out. So with that, that's my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the city council has, and also, as I mentioned, the applicant is here to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Yes, Mr. Lincoln.
Do the spaces adjacent to the pumps count as parking spaces or not?
The applicant did count those as parking spaces, and our code did not, is silent on it. So we went ahead as staff and counted those as parking spaces as well.
So they're, with 3 pumps or 3 pump islands, they're short how many spaces?
They were short 3 spaces.
From 38 to 35?
Yes.
And then after removing the 1 pump island, they could add back in 1 additional space, I
So
guess?
I believe they had a net gain of 3 spaces. A net gain of taking out the 2, and then so they put in 5, and so they got a net gain of 3, which got them right to the number.
Do we have it within our purview to waive the parking requirement minimum and let them do 3 pump islands?
You certainly can. I would say if
Planning
that's
Commission
something.
doesn't advise it?
Correct. That's what I was going to say. If the city council wants to go that, I would recommend that you send this back to your planning commission and have them review the appropriateness of removing one of the fueling stations, since that is one of the staff conditions of approval and it is something that the planning commission approved.
What's the enforcement mechanism on the ride-in? The ride-in, ride-out?
So it is actually, because it'll be design, it's the design of it, essentially, is to, makes it much more
Right.
difficult for someone to.
Will there be a
Go
barrier in the median to keep
There
people
is.
from doing a
yes,
left
there
turn?
is. And actually, I can show you a good example. This is one that is up on Kessler and 75th Street, so it's right in front of the hospital, in front of the new medical office building that was constructed there. And this is generally the design of what those are. Again, as you can see, it forces traffic to make a right turn.
On coming out?
Yes, I'm
But
coming
what
out.
about for going in?
The one that is designed for we were looking at will have the same feature on this side as well. Again, it's one of the stipulations.
Okay.
The applicant does show it on the plans. However, the city engineer, one of the conditions that the city engineer
I'm-
asked for was to work with the city engineer for design that meets engineering standards.
Trying to get my head around someone coming from the west and trying to make a left turn. And when will they know that they can't make that left turn?
Well, it will be signed as no entry, no entry. Do not enter.
But you're coming from the other direction,
So if you're,
across.
if you're
and
east,
trying to get across all of those 3 lanes of traffic, and then you find out that there's a barrier there.
so if you're eastbound, to turn in there, you
Yeah,
will
if you're
see.
eastbound,
You'll see a sign before you turn in there. It's tough to see,
Okay.
but there's a sign that says do not enter.
okay. I'm just,
As well as you can also see too, again, this also be striped as well.
Yes, Ms. Ryder?
So to clarify, if someone eastbound wants to turn in there, they have to turn on Schweitzer
Correct,
beforehand? Okay.
correct.
Mr. Silvers?
I have a comment and a question. Isn't this intersection or this entry similar to what we put in at they put in at Grand Station?
Grand Station is different because it's a full median. This road does not have a full median.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. My question has to do with the tanks, the gas tanks that are right beyond the right in, right out. Has there been consideration as to the possibility of traffic backup onto 75th Street if there is a fuel tank, tanker truck there filling that?
Well, the tanker truck, as you can see, it does show the turning radiuses on there. The tanker truck, I would assume, would be pulling in. It's not going to be on top of the tanks, so it'll be probably, most likely, would be pulling in to try to occupy this area here, and obviously, hopefully, would give space for folks turning to get in there.
Thank you.
And I have a question about all of the wonderful green trees, especially on 75th Street, but even on Schweitzer, and what kind of things those are going to be and what line of sight guarantees we're going to have.
Right. So they're all should be under our 3-foot maximum height for a side triangle. And then also, particularly on 75th Street, the right in, right out makes it makes the sight vision triangle a little bit less important. I don't want to say important, but a little bit less of note, because when you're turning, it's when you're making that left turn, looking back to the right, where sight vision starts to become difficult. So if you're making a right turn, you have quite a bit of line of sight back to your left to see up the street. But again, we will make sure that it stays under the 3-foot minimum, maximum, I should say.
For me, there's a line of sight even if I'm turning east. I'm coming south on Schweitzer and turning east on 75th Street, because some of my friends and neighbors in that area don't always pay attention to the stoplights. So I have to be able to really see what's happening. Are there other questions?
I just have a comment that I would be okay sending it back to Planning Commission to allow them to put in a third pump island. I don't know if anybody else feels that way or not.
I do not feel that way, because I feel like if we're going to have a convenience store there, we're going to need parking. So,
I know, I think 35 is a lot of spaces personally, but Stacey's got a question.
I sort of agree with you, Jacob, but thinking about the pumper truck and filling the tanks, and that gives a little bit more space for that without that pump there. And then also, there's other tenants in that building. It's not just the convenience store. So to think about them too. And the planning commission wanted it, so we should trust them in my mind.
are there other comments?
I do.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, my comment, I don't think the planning commission can deal with, because there's not enough room. I just think the traffic is going to be a snarl. And I understand the traffic study comes back and said it's not going to be significantly worse, just maybe a little bit worse. But that shouldn't be our goal. Our goal should be to do something better. And the right in, right out is just going to move that traffic snarl over onto Schweitzer. I don't know. I drive through that intersection every day, almost every day, and sometimes multiple times. And I just can't see this working. I just can't support this.
Okay, given all of that kind of feedback, I would entertain a motion. Ms. Yodrich?
I move that the council concur with the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve, with conditions, a preliminary development plan for Mac Retail Center in a PUDG district located at 10270 West 75th Street, and authorize the mayor to sign the effectuating ordinance.
And is there a second? Yes, Ms. Shavetta.
I second.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
No.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1.
Thank you. And Mr. Dyer, did you want to cover the next item as well?
Well, there was the plat, and like I said, it's very straightforward plat, gonna make those two parcels to one parcel and dedicate, the right-of-way, that we need for Schweitzer.
If there are no questions, I entertain a motion.
I move that the council accept the dedication of right-of-way and easements shown in the Schweitzer Park final plat.
Is there a second? Yes, Ms. Ryder.
I second that.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy. Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay, the next item, Ms. Gard is anticipating me calling her to the podium, where we're going to start talking about a resolution of intent.
We are. Good evening. There are a few things I wanted to talk about before we get this presentation started this evening. The first being, you're not going to be making any decisions tonight. You're not being asked to make any decisions tonight. We are simply here to hear from the public, which I feel like we have quite a few people who'd like to speak tonight. Hopefully nothing you hear tonight is new information. We've talked about this a number of times already, and so hopefully I've summarized it enough for you and for our residents here tonight. But like I said, we're here to hear from them. Again, no action is being taken. This process can be stopped at any time, as I've mentioned over the course of the last few conversations. Everything we've done up until this point and actually moving forward, as outlined in your packet, is a statutory process. We've reviewed that statute a number of times and interpreted it a number of times. I will say we are only the second community in Kansas to follow this statute. The statute was written in the late teens, and the only other community to follow it is the city of Lawrence for their recycling services. And so we believe that this is the best process to go to, and we have a lot of references with not only our city attorney helping us, but also the city of Lawrence, like I mentioned. Something that I think you're going to hear a lot tonight from our residents is details of the plan. I'm just going to start this conversation with telling you we don't have those details right now. We don't know what the price is going to be. We don't know what the container size is going to be. We don't know what day of the week that trash is going to be picked up, assuming that we move forward with this process and go through the bidding process. There's a lot of details of this program that are unknown. What we are talking about tonight is what's called the resolution of intent. This was included in your packet, the entirety of the resolution. It was also published in the the paper of record for the city. But this is the first official required by state statute document to kick off this process. Again, you're not being asked to vote on this evening. Per the state statute, there's a 30-day statutory wait between this public hearing tonight and when you do consider the resolution and vote on it. It will be at the first meeting in October. But we want to hear from the public. We want you to hear from the public all of the comments and all of the opinions that they have before you're asked to vote on that. So the resolution is from the statute, officially the announcements of the city to consider organizing trash recycling and yard waste service. So if you do, which you don't have to, but if you do pass that resolution in October, that is our official announcement to everyone. Yes, we are proceeding with this process at this time. We are going to organize a plan. We'll talk about what that is here in a little bit, but this is essentially our official announcement, and it is the first step to kick off the process. Again, you'll consider that in October, but we are talking about it this evening. What it does is it provides notice to, and this is quote from the statute, interested persons in the planning and establishment of the collection service. Not only does that mean it notices the public, but it also notices all of the registered trash haulers within the city of Merriam. It establishes the purposes and goals, which I will talk about here on the next slide. It also indicates the funding source for the program, which will most likely be, and again, this is not a decided topic, but it most likely will be a solid waste fee assessed on the resident's property tax bill if we move forward with this process. It also establishes where we're going to post our information for public engagement. We do have notice of our public meetings not only on our city's website, but we have established a very specific web page for this issue. And then per, obviously, the state statute, we have to publish it in the newspaper of record. And probably the most important thing that the resolution of intent does, other than notifying the official announcement, it also establishes the next public hearing in this process and establishes the date for that. That second public hearing will be on what's called the Organized Collection Service Plan. We'll talk about what that is here in a few slides, but it establishes the date of December 9th. So if you do pass the resolution of intent in October, we will have a second public hearing at the December 9th City Council meeting. Are there any questions on this slide? The purpose and goals, we have covered these on a number of occasions, but just for the residents in the room that may not have watched those presentations, we ultimately want to provide the highest level of service to the residents. We want an oversight of a predictable contract. We've heard from a number of residents not only that their trash pickup unpredictable, but their contract, most often we hear is prices, but also their contracts are unpredictable as well. And so if there's one contact point with the city working with the service provider, we believe that's going to provide a higher level of service. We do believe that it's going to decrease the resident costs of the services, and it will reduce the quantity of trucks on our streets. And if there's less trucks on our streets, there's going to be less emission, noise pollution, maintenance required of our city streets. And obviously also public safety if there's fewer trucks on our streets as well. As I've mentioned, we've talked about this on a number of occasions. Earlier this year, we had a citizen satisfaction survey, a statistically valid survey that we'll go over the results here again here just a second. At the July City Council meeting, we provided almost an identical presentation to this in which you all directed staff to proceed with the process. That's why we're here this evening. Holding the public hearing. We did notice this public hearing, as I mentioned, in the newspaper of record on all of our platforms that we can communicate with, and now we're holding our public hearing tonight. In the 2024 community survey results, you can see here we asked the question if Merriam should implement a citywide contract to provide trash and recycling services. 65% of the respondents either strongly agreed or agreed to that statement. I want to remind the governing body that this was a statistically valid survey, and just because everybody didn't answer the survey doesn't mean that it's not statistically valid. And so we do assume that this is the general sentiment of the community. And when we followed up the question of if we should implement a program, we asked how we should prioritize this initiative, and over 44% either indicated it was a highest or it should be one of our highest priorities.
Caitlin, do you remember how many items were in the list that we asked them to prioritize? Was it 4 or 5?
It was 5. If I recall, it was about 5 initiatives that you all have been considering over the course of the last few years. For example, one of them was open burning. One of them was reinventing downtown Merriam, things like that. I wanted to reiterate how many times we have tried to. This isn't the right presentation. It's okay. How many times we have tried to notice the public on this particular issue. Not only did we include it in our Highlights magazine because we recognize that there are a number of different residents that may not have access to either the internet or maybe don't just use our social media or web page platforms. We wanted to make sure that it was in a print media form as well. And so Highlights hits every resident mailbox, and that was included, that hit our mailboxes at the end of July. It was almost a half page on this particular issue. In addition to that, I did mention that we also have a web page particularly identified for this topic. Not only do we include links to any time that we've talked about this at a city meeting, but also any information that we would like the public to include, including the resolution of intent that you all will be considering. On that webpage, we did include essentially a feedback form where we asked the community to provide all sorts of feedback on this topic. It was essentially an open box that residents got to provide a list of information or a list of comments that they'd like to provide. And on social media, we published this more than 5 times off the top of my head, not only on our Facebook page, but also on our Nextdoor page to be able to reach the number of residents as possible. Sorry, this isn't the most updated presentation. That's okay. I have it in front of me. But we did get 188 responses from that online comment form as of, I did have to draw a line here, as of last Thursday, the 22nd at 9 a.m. It is still active, so if residents want to go out and continue to fill out that form, we will have it remain active. Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you, Julie. We will have it remain active for the duration of the process and until this is concluded. But we had 188 responses, and as you can see here, generally 35% supported the single hauler. There were a lot of conditional supports. I support this if it's going to be cheaper. I support this if my HOA isn't included. I support this if blank. Again, a number of things that we don't have answers to at this point, but there was conditional support. 20% did not support single hauler, and then there was just a lot of general neutral or just commentary. There was a lot of commentary on, I like this provider more than I like this provider, that didn't indicate one way or the other if they were in support or in opposition of this process. Next slide. Oh, thank you. We did have themes to the items we heard as well. You can see here, almost everything on this list we don't have an answer to, as I mentioned. Once we get through the plan and develop a bidding process and go out to bid, we will have answers to these questions, but that's quite a ways down the road. We just don't have the answers to that. We also would like the answers to these, but one of the number one things we heard is we want it to be cheaper, whether people were for it or against it. Trash service is expensive, is what we generally heard from our community. Considerations for the environment, not only the maintenance on the streets, but the emissions of the vehicles and the trucks, the number of trucks on the street, the noise pollution, things like that. As I mentioned, a lot of people had a lot of opinion on providers, whether they prefer provider A or provider B. We did hear a number, most of those who did not support us moving forward with single hauler they want to keep resident choice. People want to be able to choose their own trash hauler. Whether or not in the contract, we would give consideration to seniors or disabled residents came up a number of times. There were a lot of questions about logistics. Again, we don't have the answers to how will this be billed, how often will it be billed, what will that look like? Will it be a separate bill for my property tax bill? We will establish those during the development of the plan later down the road if you all choose to. Whether yard waste or composting would be included in the program. We heard a lot about bin size, whether residents just don't produce a lot of trash, whether they could have a larger bin or a smaller bin based on their individual needs. And then whether recycling, we heard a lot whether recycling would be, the frequency of recycling will be picked up. Again, that will be developed in the plan if we choose to move forward with that. Thank you, Julie. We have next steps. You'll see this slide a number of times this evening. I mentioned the state statute essentially lays out the timeline for us. So this was included in your packet. As I mentioned, there's a 30-day waiting period between this public hearing and when you all will consider the resolution of intent. So that will be at the October 14th City Council meeting. If you do choose to adopt the resolution, moving forward, the staff will develop what's called the organized collection plan. In a couple slides, we'll talk about what that actually means. But staff would ultimately recommend that we have essentially a community committee to help us develop that plan, whether that be made up of just residents or whether that be made up of residents and council representatives. That will be up to you all. But we think that we want as much resident feedback and community feedback during this process as we can. After the development of that plan, as I mentioned at the December 9th City Council meeting, we will have our second public hearing in this process, bring that plan back forward before you. If you adopt that plan, then we will essentially go out to bid. So even at the second public hearing, we won't have answers to the questions that I just told you. We'll have answers to some of them because they will be in the bidding documents, whether recycling is picked up weekly or biweekly is an example to that. We won't know the price. We won't know which hauler it's going to be until after the bidding process is complete. So we'll know a little bit more information, but we won't know all the answers to all the questions that we're getting at that point. From then, we think it's going to take a few months to go through the bidding process. Then in April-ish of next year, spring of next year, we'll bring forward the first and second readings of essentially the contract, the ordinance establishing the contract for solid waste service. Per state statute, if you all, at any point, you can cancel any of these conversations, but if you do move through this process and adopt the organized collection plan and the contract, once we go out to bid, there is an 18-month mandatory window by state statute, not only to work with the residents to get them off of their individual contracts, but if we choose to include HOAs or not, again, that's going to be up to you all. 18-month window, so we will, if we are on this timeline, we will be officially single hauler by October of 2026. Okay, we talked about an organized collection plan is. It's essentially the development of the contract documents, of the RFP documents. We are not talking about this tonight. You are not voting on this anytime soon, but we've mentioned what an organized collection plan is, so I would be remiss if I didn't explain what that is to you. So again, if you all adopt the resolution of intent at the October meeting, we would develop this plan. Again, staff would recommend a community committee to assist us with that. A number of public meetings, outlining the process essentially for the RFP and the contract documents, which will include definition of whom service is given to, expectations for the collection. As I mentioned, we heard a lot about recycling, but other collection services as well, container management. So at that point, we would then establish, are there multiple size options? Are there not multiple size options? What does that look like? Customer service expectations. We did hear a lot in that comment form from the community. Who do we call logistically? Logistically, who do we call if we have an issue, if trash service isn't picked up? Whose responsibility is that? We would establish that during this collection plan development. Insurance requirements. We obviously want any of the trash haulers that respond to this bidding process to have insurance. And then again, billing expectations. Like I mentioned, most likely it will be a solid waste fee assessed on the property tax bill. There are other scenarios, but this is the most common in the state of Kansas, and to be honest, is going to be the easiest on the city of Merriam. With that, it also has an implementation timeline and any evaluation criteria we're going to have with the bidding process. And then we will have to, in the plan, justify any program assessments that we're going to do. So administrative fees or anything like that will be completely outlined in the collection plan before we go out to bid that you all are going to ultimately approve. So again, we're not voting on anything tonight. You're here to hear from the public. We want to hear all of the feedback that they have. From here, you will consider the resolution of intent at the October 14th City Council meeting. And then again, that's the same schedule that we saw earlier. But moving forward, we would then develop the collection plan. With that, I am done with my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
This is the time for council questions. Yes, Mr. Silvers.
I was just wanting a clarification for council, but also for people here in the gallery. So if this resolution passes, there will be 18 months for people to, if we adopt single hauler,
Yeah.
there'll be 18 months for people to ramp down their contracts with their haulers and then come on board to this new program.
Yeah, will you scroll back to the calendar, please? Yeah, the statute window, the statute is poorly written, to be honest. The 18-month timeline won't kick off until you all essentially accept the bid and accept the contract from when we go out to bid, which most likely won't be until April or spring of next year.
Okay, and I probably worded my question incorrectly because I was speaking to after, at that point. So just to clarify, people will then, if this goes through, people will then stop paying haulers individually, and they will get some sort of bill, whether it's on their property tax bill or another bill. So it could be seen as a tax, but they will also not be paying an additional fee to a hauler. So they're transferring their payment to a hauler to the city somehow through a tax bill or another form of payment.
Correct, yes. And we really do anticipate that cost being less. Even though it is going to be on a property tax bill and it will be an additional line, most likely on your property tax bill, you won't be paying quarterly or monthly or however often you already paying to your trash hauler. That will go away essentially as soon as you're on the city's contract. You're welcome.
Mr. Leahy?
I believe you alluded to it, but just to hear it succinctly, we can't know what our final bid and contract will be and whether or not it's worth approving unless we go through this entire process.
Correct.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from the council? Ms. Ryder?
You said Lawrence is the only other city who's done this so far.
And only for their recycling services, not for their solid waste. We are the first in the state of Kansas to go through the entirety of this process.
So how do they feel about
That
it?
does not mean that there are other cities who have single hauler.
Right,
They just didn't go through the statute.
gotcha.
Okay.
So I'm
Do
sorry
we
if that was
know-
confusing.
Do we know how other cities like using single haulers?
Yep. So in the last presentation that I gave back in July, we did a summary of all of the Johnson County cities that are and are not on single hauler. We heard a lot of feedback, both on the administrative side, but also on the community side as well. It is cheaper for those communities, aggregately, I guess. Individually, there could potentially be a scenario in which a handful of people are going to pay more, but overall, people are paying less. Therefore, they're happy with the service.
Are there other council? Oh, yes, Mr. Silver.
Just to kind of add on to that, the reason why some people got higher bills, but most people are satisfied is if you speak to your neighbors, you might be paying an introductory low price, but your neighbors stayed with the same hauler for a long time and their price continuously went up. And so they could be as much as double what other people are paying. Is that correct?
There are hundreds of different reasons people pay different, just like your phone bill, I would assume. There's hundreds of different reasons that people pay different prices.
Other council questions? Okay. Given that, I am
Thank you, guys.
going to explain the rules that we're going to use for the public hearing. One is when you come to the podium, please state your name and address very clearly so that they can appear in the minutes properly. Each speaker will have up to 5 minutes to provide comment, and I'll attempt to give you a signal when your time is coming short. We're here to listen and gain input from all sides, so let's be sure that all who wish to speak have a chance to be heard. We value all feedback, and we have seen a lot of feedback already. We want to keep the meeting efficient and to be respectful of each other's time, so please summarize your points if they've already been addressed by others. I'm going to reiterate. I'm going to say this as many times as Ms. Gard already has. No action is being taken on the resolution of intent this evening. So if you have additional comments after the meeting, please feel free to fill out our online form, and we'll review all input very carefully. With that, I open the public hearing at this time for formal feedback on the resolution of intent to organize waste collection services. And we had 3 people sign in, so I'm going to call those people first, and then after that we'll have you raise your hands. First to the podium is Janet Sperry.
I'm Janet Sperry. I live at 6309 Goodman Drive in Vernon Place. Part of my comments they've already been addressed as far as like, oh, how big is the container going to be? But my question is, what will the city do as far as screening and require screening for these big containers that some of us can't get in our garage? I've already given up curbside recycling because I can't get the container in my garage. We're narrow and shallow, and I have 2 doors opening from my house into my garage, so I can't get them in there. And Waste Management was the only one that let me keep the small one, because I called all the other haulers and they only have the big one. So knowing now that the rules state that they need to be behind the front property line and screened, that's kind of iffy, because I'm looking at my neighbor's trash cans all the time. But that having been said, what are the requirements for screening? Because we also have very narrow side yards with retaining walls. There's no place to put them. And we have steps going into the backyard. I'm not going to drag one of those great big things in the snow out. So what are the options if we end up with big containers?
Okay, I was remiss not to say this. We're not going to attempt to answer your questions this evening, but I really appreciate your
It's just,
comment.
I'm just bringing that out as like, there's
Thank
going to
you.
be an additional question. Okay.
Thank you. And next would be Lynn Field.
Linfield, 6400 Hadley, also in Vernon Place. And without any, I think it's a brilliant idea to combine them. We've kind of gone through different cycles with them. But there's three different haulers that go through our neighborhood each week, which amounts to 9 big trucks. It's good. I'm sure Brian's got to, he's got to just bite his tongue on how often he's got to go planning extra overlays. But it's just, one, the traffic and congestion and, all the points that were brought up, of course. But I think it's a brilliant idea. So that's, without getting into any more details, I would suggest approving a single hauler.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And next to the podium would be Mark Peckham.
Mark Peckham, 6600 Antioch Road. Well, I agree with the consolidating the waste pickup in our city would be a benefit to the traffic of our streets. I'd like to point to a couple of thoughts as to why a single carrier may not be in the best interest. A single carrier means that our city will be subject to disruption of service if that carrier is hit by a labor dispute, a facility fire, or a natural disaster of a tornado or flood. A single carrier would mean that smaller companies will not be in the running to bid for a citywide contract. A single carrier might cause a smaller company to rescind all of its private residential contracts in order to bid on this single large contract. This would impact not only each private resident, but it also would force that company to put its total existence on one contract. In response, I would ask that the city council would consider dividing the city into actually 2 or even 3 zones, each having its own single hauler. This would accomplish, number 1, it would meet the needs of our city for less truck traffic. Number 2, it will allow smaller companies to bid without putting in jeopardy private resident contracts they have outside of our city. And number 3, it would buffer the results to our city if any type of catastrophe should befall any or that contractor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, those are the only people who signed in out in the lobby. So now if you would raise your hand, then I will call on you to come in. Yes, sir. Please come forward.
Ask you to be patient.
Oh, we can be very patient.
These were made for people eating disorders or something. I'm not skinny anymore. My name is Stephen Allen, 5031 Farley. I was one of the, I guess, few in this area, unlucky people who had Superior that was then bought out by Republic. And I had serious issues with Republic. So I am obviously concerned if the council or whoever is responsible for making a decision about the hauler chooses Republic. But I also have some concerns about the single hauler idea because of that. Because there were multiple haulers, I was able to go to somebody else who chose to do their job. Whatever decision is made in terms of hauling, I hope that there is some kind of procedure for levying a penalty for not picking up trash, and it has to be adequate so that, they will respond. If you know anything about Republic is not a small company. And I'm aware of other either home associations or cities trying to levy a penalty against them, and it really didn't do a heck of a lot. So whatever you do, I'm against the single hauler ideal, obviously, but whatever you do, if you go with that route, you make sure that there is an adequate penalty if they don't do their job. Thank you.
Thank you. So who would like to be next? Yes, sir.
My name is Lester Meharry. I live at 10108 West 70th Street. My comments kind of dovetail into, what was it, Steve Allen? Yeah, Stephen. How will Merriam measure performance? Something to keep in mind, because the Johnson County Post had an article dated June 21st by Juliana Garcia that Prairie Village fined Republic Services $28,000 for missed trash pickups. So something to keep in mind. How will you measure performance? And there was an allusion, a reference made to a single point of contact. If a single hauler doesn't pick up my trash, who do I call? Do I call the trash company, or do I call Merriam? But in any case, should Merriam know about this in order to keep track of their performance? And how often will contracts expire and be open again for bid? Because by chance, perhaps you go with Republic and you get so many comments that you either fine them or discontinue them. How often are you going to allow other companies to come in and bid for your services? And I have some other questions here, but I think that the prior presentation has everything open, so we'll see. But my concerns echoes the prior gentleman's comments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And who else would like to speak? Yes, sir.
Hi, Ruben Kozmeyer, 5800 Hadley Street. I'm just going to say that I'm in favor of the single hauler trash service, and I'd encourage everyone who opposes it to take a look at their quarterly statements and see what you're paying, and then look at the property tax bills of some of the nearby cities and see what they're paying. So my trash bill through Casey Disposal is a little on the high end because they just bumped up our prices. So I'm paying $504 a year. Last quarter, it was at $436 per year. If you look at Fairway, Roland Park, and Mission, all of those cities each pay between $190 and $230, annually for their trash service. So, less than half of what I've got. And it's not often that the city council can just, do a thing and decide to save everybody $300 a year, just with no necessary decrease in quality of life or quality of services. And so, that my trash bill's on the high end, maybe the savings would be a little lower. Maybe it'd only be, $200 a year. Merriam's got 5,000 households. Maybe not all of them will go through the single hauler trash service. Maybe it's only, 4,000 households. But still, that's saving Merriam taxpayers $800,000 a year, just at 4,000 households, and then saving only $200 per year. That's, I think that's pretty significant. I don't feel very strongly about who picks up my trash every week, right? When I moved to Merriam, I called the 3 different places. I saw who was the cheapest, and I picked them. A couple of years later, I had to do the same thing because the prices kept going up. But as long as my trash is being picked up regularly, as long as the trash company's not making a mess and their rates are reasonable, I don't really care, who my trash company is. If I'm upset, yeah, I can go get a new trash company, but, that's not going to change anybody's behavior. They're only losing a single customer. If, the city of Merriam's upset, they can change behaviors. They can issue, fines, apparently. They might have to fight, given Prairie Village's recent experiences. But, that's 4,000 customers that the trash company would be losing if Merriam changes. So I think, Merriam has a lot more power than we do as individuals. And yeah, no, I think it's a wonderful idea. It saves, everybody a lot of money. So, thanks.
Thank you. And who's next? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, I'm Rose Geringer. And just the gentleman's comments gave me another question. Is this going to be required or will it be optional? Will it be required or will it be optional for residents? And how about commercial properties? Those are good questions that I hope get answered in the course of the discussions with the city staff and the council. Also, will these costs be covered by the prices that are charged? Like some cities, they say it's $171 a year on your property tax. But what about the hidden costs of the staff time to manage this and log all those complaints and follow up with the company? Are we going to have to add staff? So those are some hidden costs that we might not see on our property tax statement, but we will in the general fund. So I just want you to, think about the hidden costs of doing this. I mean, it sounds like a good idea to set out, but there are some real things to consider. So I'm glad that you're here to listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Billy Crone, 6633 Wed Street. Even staff noted that Merriam's single hauler project was socialist, and that has eliminated free market from trash haulers in Merriam. That was on the agenda in this room. It was on the projector just about a month ago. I don't want socialized trash service any more than I want socialized healthcare. It's much easier to give up freedom than it is to get it back. I don't want to find out 2 years from now that you want to change your trash service, change up the contract, how it works, reducing services or limiting how much you can throw away, maybe even forcing people to recycle. I don't want government meddling in trash service. I want less government, less taxes, even if those taxes go to offset some money. I'll note, on the topic of money, that $95,000 a year cost I found in the budget for next year, the draft, for managing this contract. So it seems like it's taken for granted that it's already going to get approved and that it's going to cost that $95,000 a year in staff costs. Who's going to pay for that? All of us. There's more to the equation than dollar signs, though. Freedom of choice is a valuable American freedom itself. The only way I would support Merriam's single hauler is if residents could opt out with no punishment from the city. Save our freedom. Only the free market can adequately address the needs of Merriam residents, as you heard this evening. We had some examples. And making the whole city dependent on one hauler exposes us to disruption if that company has issues. So please say no to single hauler. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others who would like to speak this evening? Yes, ma'am.
D.K. Weimer, 4803 Knox Avenue. Everything I have to say has already been said, but I think the most important thing is that it would interfere with competition in small companies being able to establish. It would stop competition in pricing. I lived in Wyandotte County, and the numbers that were just quoted, and I've lived now here for over 10 years, but we were paying over $300, I would say we were paying close to $400 I don't think it was a year. It must not have been $400 a month, but I was paying quite a bit for pickup there, and I had no option. Not having an option, I think, is really, I couldn't take my business somewhere else when I didn't like what I was being provided. And the fact that we don't know what it's going to cost in the first place, I think that's, until we know, how can we even be talking about this? I find it hard. And then we don't know if there's going to be yard waste, as well as recycling. I don't understand that those aren't automatically being included in this, or I guess it's because we don't know who's going to be providing. It just doesn't, I've already put online my objection to this, and without more information and not being allowed to opt out, I don't feel that it's appropriate.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
My name is Jim Stanker. I'm at 6423 Hadley in Vernon Place. And I would just guess, after having lived here in Merriam for a little bit over 40 years, that you guys are going to do your due diligence, in terms of what a waste hauler is going to be able to do and what they have done in other places. I also think that if we have 5,000 people that are participating in this, you're going to have a lot more clout than just an individual, who's going out on their own to do what they need to do as far as their waste is concerned. I never really thought that hauling trash was a passionate issue. At least it hasn't been for me, as far as the color of the bins or the trucks or whatnot. If I read this right, we have 9 haulers that are approved to operate in the city of Merriam?
I think it's more like 6.
6, okay. One comment that we have 3 going through Vernon Place Homes Association. If we had 6, it would really be a problem from everything that was issued as far as maintenance on the streets and noise and air pollution and all the rest of that stuff. But to Lynn's point, he said six times the trucks go through the neighborhood. We've got kind of a goofy neighborhood with really only one in and one out, and so the trucks have to come in and they have to go somewhere and they come back and then they go back. I sit at the corner of 64th Terrace and Hadley, and I'm retired, so there's a lot of times I don't have a lot to do. And I'll count a truck that goes in front of my house 6, 7 times. One truck, on the trash side. Going to do the exact same thing when they pick up the waste. They're going to do the same thing if they're coming through to pick up the yard waste. So I think it's a lot more that traffic. And I've heard from people in the city that one truck going through a street is equivalent to about 2,500 cars that go through that. So I really appreciate and support the fact that Merriam is looking to do the common good. And I don't really see this as a socialist, communist, plot against anything. I see it as you guys doing something good for the city. It would be equivalent to having an issue with snow removal or the big trash pickup. You're doing something that helps a lot of people. Maybe not everybody, but it helps. It helps a lot of people. Real quick, I'm also the treasurer of Vernon Place Homes Association, and I deal occasionally with the realtors and title companies. And every once in a while, I'll have a comment from either of those two when they're calling me to find out what the Homes Association dues are. And we do not cover trash in our Homes Association. At $6 a year, Homes Association, it would be cost prohibitive for us. But they do occasionally ask me about whether we have single hauler or whether we have multiple haulers coming into the neighborhood. And I get the feeling that they have had that question from people that are dealing with them for a mortgage or to buy a house, and that a single hauler is a more attractive option for someone who's looking down the streets. We have potentially up to 5 days a week with haulers going through, and I would certainly support everything that the city could do to make that a single hauler. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there others who would like to speak? If not, I now close the public hearing. All right. Council, having heard the public comments this evening, I want to know if you have any additional questions on this topic. Okay, so hearing none, I'm just going to restate that we encourage people to continue to provide public comments through the website. There's a form, through social media, through emails, through phone calls if you have to, for staff. All of your comments get sent to your individual, all of the council members. So we will see all of them. And to remind you that council will consider just the resolution of intent to organize collection service at the October 14th council meeting. And thank you so much for coming out tonight. The next item, I believe Mr. Engel is going to discuss with us, and that's our opportunity to talk about the revenue neutral rate.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Well, Julie brings my presentation up here. It's my pleasure to present the 2025 budget this evening. I'm going to start tonight, which will hopefully be our final budget conversation, the way I started our first one in April, by holding up the budget and saying, this is the most important document that we do. It's a value statement. It's the things that we value because they're the things that we're willing to pay for as a community. We've had a nice long process to have conversations about it that started in April, where we started our CIP tour, where we talked about the infrastructure. We approve our infrastructure first. In our first meeting, April 24th, I believe it was. I think that's very, very important because it recognizes that that in the priority of things, taking care of our infrastructures first, and then we build the budget around what's left, as opposed to many of our neighboring communities, which do it the other way around. They take all of their priorities, and then they say, whatever's left, let's throw it towards the streets. And I think when we drive into some of our neighboring communities, we can tell which ones don't have a whole lot left after they do all their other priorities. So I applaud you on that process. The budget, I'm going to cover at a high level. When we get to the budget, the first piece will be the revenue neutral rate. I want to make sure that I point out that we had a document that we uploaded on Thursday night that was only up for about 2 hours that we had to pull down because it had a different draft that was in there. We were able to get the final draft in there Friday morning. And so the draft that's been online since Friday morning is the correct draft. Apologize to anybody that was able to get a hold of the other version of that. But that being said, we'll jump into the revenue neutral rate. Revenue, can I see that up here? Somehow? The revenue neutral rate is the rate that the government levies the exact same amount of taxes as they did last year for next year. Awesome. Thank you.
You want to run it?
I will run it. I got it. Thank you very much. Revenue neutral rate is that the government levies the exact same amount of property taxes that they collected last year in the next year. Essentially, from a philosophical standpoint, it means government's going to provide next year's services for last year's costs. There's no allowance for CPI growth, and there is no allowance for new construction. So the revenue neutral rate is what gets sent out to all of our residents. City Council instituted a goal last year in 2023 to reduce property tax when appropriate. I'll read it specifically. It says, while maintaining adequate reserves and funding city services, reduce the city's mill levy when possible. This proposed budget includes a 1 mill levy reduction from the 2023 budget. If you will recall, last year, and I've got a graphic that I'll show you this, the council voted to decrease the budget by a quarter. We had a clerical error that it reduced much more than the quarter mill, went down to 22.929. So our proposed 2025 budget mill rate is an increase, but that is something that we have pushed out in all of our channels from the time that we discovered that we had that error in the budget form to all of our residents through the highlights, through online, through direct mailers. We actually did a postcard to folks so that we would make sure that folks were aware that that was going to happen. So revenue neutral rate for 2024, 2025, I'll kind of go through exactly how the mechanics of a revenue neutral rate works. So the 2023, 2024 assessed valuation of all property in the city is $268.1 million. That generated $6.1 million in property tax with the city mill rate of 22.929. That is the mill rate that we are living under right now. Property taxes this year are projected to bring in $6.1 million. Again, that is based upon an error, but that is the facts. That's the world that we live in right now. Based upon that, the revenue neutral rate means that with the assessed valuation going up to $290.4 million, in order to generate that $6.1 million, we would need to decrease the mill to 21.168. That would be what's called the revenue neutral rate. That means we are bringing in the exact same amount of money next year as we did this year. What that would look like in the context of our neighboring cities is it would look good if we were in some sort of ranking. If this was the Olympics, we'd have bronze. The reality is that that's not, and we've been pretty clear, that's not feasible for us to continue to maintain the level of services that we need to. The 21.169 is only higher than Lake Quivira, which does not offer the suite of services that we offer, but they have $1 million homes to put that assessed valuation through to help fund those minimal level of services. And Overland Park, as we all know, is a unicorn that is like no other city probably anywhere in the United States in terms of their assessed valuation, their home values, and the amount of sales tax they bring in. So this is where we would fit into the pecking order of mill rates if we were to adopt the revenue neutral rate of 21.168. That is not what staff is recommending. We've been very clear about that. What staff is recommending is a mill rate of 26.665, which again, based on the assessed valuation of $290 million of property within the community, would levy $7.7 million in property tax. The difference between the revenue neutral rate amount of property tax we would gather and the amount at the recommended mill rate of 26.665 would be an addition of $1.5 million. That's about the amount of money that we had to forego because of the clerical error in our budget last year. So it puts us back about at par where we were. To put that in the context of where we are with all of our neighbors, we're still in the upper half. It gives the city of Merriam residents and property taxpayers a lower property tax mill than Lenexa, Prairie Village, Mission, Fairway, Westwood, Mission Hills, Westwood Hills, Gardner, Roland Park, DeSoto, and Edgerton. That's a pretty favorable location. I'm sure that anybody that lives in any of those cities would love to have our mill rate as proposed at 26.665. To put it in the context of the last 15 years, actually I think it's the last 17 years, about the last 15 years, for 13 years, we held the mill levy rate steady in our community. It was 27.5, about 27. It varies a little bit from year to year depending on the amount of revenue and how many people actually pay their taxes. But we did not, as a council, as a city, we did not vote since 2009 to change that mill levy until last year. Last year, we voted to do a quarter decrease as a result of that being a council goal. So we were able to sharpen our pencils at the staff level, work with the council to find ways to decrease this. We actually eliminated some of our debt, so we were able to take that money that was going towards debt and say, okay, well, we don't have the debt anymore. We can roll the mill back. We rolled it back a little bit more than we intended, as you can see by our chart. But when we told the residents what we were going to do, that we were going to need to bring it back up, we really took the opportunity to say, let's see where we can reset this mill rate at an appropriate place. We're not going to take this back up to 27.665 if it doesn't need to be at 27.665. We were able to build a budget that maintains our balances, maintains our level of service at 26.665, which is a 1 mil decrease from where it was. Now, you're probably not going to be able to see this, but this is the budget form that was in the paper. It has our budget authority in there. It has, if you can see, maybe I can make this bigger. Let's take a look here. You can see on our budget form here that the revenue rate is 21.168. We're recommending 26.665, bringing in $7.7 million in property tax for the recommended budget in 2025. So the revenue neutral rate, before I turn this over to the council president and answer any questions, or she opens up the public hearing, the point of this particular piece of the agenda, this public hearing, and the motion that will be requested at the end of it is, do we want to maintain the revenue neutral rate of 21.168 or do we not? It's not necessarily to say, hey, we want it to be, if we want it to be anything more than 21.168, I would suggest that you approve this because the next conversation will be about the budget. But so if we want it to be 21.168, we would want to reject the motion, if that makes sense. I'm happy to answer any questions before we open up the public hearing.
I have one question that if you could talk briefly about how the budget is built to anticipate future expenses that we may need to incur, that there are chances that we might not have to incur those expenses. For example, somebody to administer single hauler trash
Sure.
or other line items.
I actually have that as part of my next presentation, if that'll wait, but I'm happy to answer it right now if you'd like.
Waiting's fine.
Okay. In short, in general terms, there are times where we stick things in the budget where we are very clear with the public, we are very clear with the council that this is something that, because we build budgets 18 months in advance, sometimes we don't know if we're going to need something. We want to be prepared for it. We are very clear when those things are put in the budget that, hey, we would have to come back to the council. This is not something that we can just divert to some other purpose. So if we don't need it, we won't buy it, we won't fund it, we won't hire whoever it is, whatever it is. So in general terms, that is the rules that we follow. But it's just, it would be, we would not be, in my opinion, doing our job if we were not thinking ahead and trying to be prepared. Did that generally answer your question?
Yeah, sorry for jumping ahead because I know this is revenue neutral, but before we get
Happy to
comments
answer
on
the
revenue
question.
neutral.
Happy to answer any other questions about the revenue neutral rate before you open up the public hearing.
Right. If there are no other questions. And again, before I open the public hearing, I want to be sure everyone knows about stating their names if they're coming to the podium to speak, names and addresses, and that we have a 5-minute limit. All the other rules as well. Okay, given that, I open the public hearing on our consideration of exceeding the revenue neutral rate. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? Yes, sir.
Billy Crone, 6633 Wed Street. So our mill rate this year is down substantially from the one before because of a major clerical error, a mistake by our city admin in filing the budget with the state, and there's no way to fix that. And the story we've all been told is that we're hurting, and we got to raise it back up to continue to offer the same level of services. That takes for granted that we must maintain the same level of services. There's nowhere we can trim things out. And it also is betrayed by the truth that we have spent $3.5 million in the last year buying up real estate downtown to shut it down, to bulldoze it, to close local businesses. If we're hurting so bad, how did we spend that $3.5 million? And could we maybe drop the mill rate number down a couple of points, even if we cut that kind of spending? That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to the revenue neutral rate public hearing? Yes, sir.
Name is Stephen Allen, 5031 Farley. My preference would be for the revenue neutral rate for obvious reasons, including the fact I'm elderly and on a fixed income. However, I could understand Merriam going with a little higher rate. So that would be my concern, is that if you vote no for maintaining the revenue neutral rate, then what would be the appropriate next rate that would not necessarily fit the budget? So my main concerns are the budget, not necessarily whether you maintain the revenue neutral rate. If you have a budget that I believe is too high, it could still be over the revenue neutral amount. So anyway, to make a long story short, I would obviously prefer revenue neutral, but I can accept a little higher rate if the budget is properly maintained.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes.
Ruben Kozmeyer, 5800 Hadley. Chris, I've got a question about the change in mill rate and how that affects, like my property taxes that I'm paying annually for a, average home, if it's the 21 that it's at now, or 26 and a half, or 27 and a half.
And again,
If
we're
we
in,
have the- oh, okay.
we're in public hearings,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure that's,
I was just going to ask for clarification of the question.
Yeah, so so the mill rate will affect as from what I understand it, the mill rate will affect my annual property taxes?
It will.
And then, so how much, so I guess I'm curious what the difference is on my property tax bill will be if, city council votes for the revenue neutral rate or the 26 and a half compared to the 27 and a half that it was 2 years ago.
okay.
We do have, there are calculators
Mhm.
that calculate that. I don't know the value of your particular home.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
It will go up.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it clearly will go up because it's a higher rate. But there are calculators that if you put the value of your home in there, it should spit out what all of the different taxing entities' levies will be.
Mhm.
And you should be able to get it that way. I'm happy to connect. I've got your contact information.
Yeah.
I'll send you a link to that.
Yeah. And
I just don't know whether you're.
yeah, right. But Merriam's not the only taxing entity on there, right? So if it goes from 21 to 26, Shawnee Mission or Johnson County are still going to be taxing the same amount, and so it's not necessarily, yeah, okay.
But I can send.
Yeah, no,
we
that'd
can
be-
make sure that-
yeah.
I think it's actually on our website.
Okay,
I know how to get hold of you.
cool, thanks.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the revenue neutral rate? Yes, ma'am.
Rose Geringer, 9931 West 56th Street. I would like to commend the city staff for maintaining excellent services this year after the big oops. If we lost $1.5 million, I didn't see it. So good job on maintaining the services that we've come to know and love living here for 25 years. When we have a constant mill rate and inflation like we have seen the last 4 years, keeping a steady rate still gives you guys lots more money. It's called a windfall. So just telling people that we're going to keep the rate level is, their taxes are still going to go up because our property values have inflated so much because the government in Washington prints so much money. So we have more dollars chasing fewer goods. It's just the way that economies work. But somehow, over the last year, you guys have found that twice as much as you didn't get. So if you lost $1.5 million, you found $3 million to buy properties downtown. We've gone into the property buying business. I don't know why we need to buy all those properties. I don't think the core project is going to require that. But it's kind of interesting that we had this big oops, and we were thinking that we were going to see less snow removal, less parks, less, public works. And we haven't seen those reductions, thankfully. But yet, we see you guys buying a lot of property. So it just doesn't quite add up. So it sounds like if you guys did great with $1.5 million less last year, maybe we can maintain the city services and not buy any $3 million properties for the next year. I think it would work. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue? Given that, I close the public hearing and ask council members, are there things that you've heard in the public hearing that you would like to have further information on? And if there are no more questions, then I will entertain a motion. Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. I move that the council approve a resolution to exceed the revenue neutral rate.
And a second? Yes.
I second that.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. And Mr. Engel, the budget.
Thank you, ma'am. This is the second portion of our public hearing tonight. This is the actual approval of the 2025 budget. I'm going to cover it at a high fund level with some call-outs on several funds, the general fund, the equipment reserve, just to talk about some of the things that are in there. And then I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has a question as we go, feel free to jump in, or I'm happy to answer them at the end if you have any. So these are our budgeted funds. Our first is our general fund. Our general fund is our operating budget. That is the largest fund that we have in terms of operating. So our 2025 proposed budget is $12.3 million for personal services, $7.4 million for contractual services. Commodities are $1 million. Health and welfare is $838,000 for a total operating budget of $21.6 million. We do have $5.5 million in transfers that we transfer out of the general fund. The majority of those go into CIP to fund CIP projects, although some of those will go into the equipment reserve to buy our larger trucks that I'll get, the larger equipment that we need to facilitate operations every year. And I'll call that out here in a second. So the total general fund uses are $27.2 million for your general fund. A couple of the highlights within the general fund: all current services are funded. All of our services, as was mentioned earlier, in terms of our resident survey, are well regarded. We will have a special presentation that we have received from ETC in terms of our ratings. If you remember last time we did this, we received a very heavy trophy. We have another one of those to present to the council for how highly we rated in all of our services. But all of our current services are funded. There's some funding provided for our 75th anniversary is next year, so there's $50,000 in there. We don't have a whole lot of details about that. If you're wondering what we're going to do, we're just now starting to gear up for it. Public Works, fire, and police equipment is in our equipment reserve. All current community grants are funded, as well as, if you'll remember last time, we added $8,300 for the homeless support center. That would be an example of something that if it doesn't happen, we wouldn't spend it, but we are encumbering that within the budget. A few other things from a personnel standpoint within the budget: we've got 3% salary increases with a 2% pool for merit or market adjustments. It's been 3 years for a salary survey, so we're already getting behind on police salaries. We're already getting behind on public works salaries. So we have a commitment from the council has a commitment to make sure that we're being competitive within Northeast Johnson County. So we're going to do another salary survey. We've got a new position to coordinate the single hauler program. We are placing that in the budget. If single hauler does not pass, because we won't know until the budget is approved, we will not hire that person. That person is being hired only if we have a single hauler program. And then there's an estimate that we're going to end up with a 12% increase on health insurance. We hope that it's closer to 9 or 10, but we're budgeting 12 because that's unfortunately about where it's been the last couple of years. Bonded interest fund. This is our debt service fund. We've got $3 million in resources coming into that account. Our debt service is $2.6 million next year. The most exciting thing about this is that after this budget, 25, we've got 2 more years of debt service. We're going to pay in 26 and we're going to pay in 27. The city will be debt free. That community center will be paid off within 10 years. That's fantastic. We will slap high fives and we will celebrate, because that is very rare that communities are able to do that. But we have 2 more years after this next year for interest payments. Bond and interest, I'm sorry. Transient guest tax, that's our bed tax. That funds our Visitors Bureau activities. It is not it does not come in through property tax. It goes through bed tax. It also funds attractions. So there are events that Park and Rec put on. That is what you see in your health and welfare line down there. So we've got $1.1 million in revenue that we project, or at least in resources. Personnel is about $400,000. Contractual commodities, $175,000. The health and welfare is $130,000 for total expenditures of $700,000 in our transient guest tax. Again, that is completely out of our bed tax. Equipment Reserve Fund, again, these are the tools that our folks need to do the great work that they do out on the street most of the time, although there are some internal things like IT and furniture that exist in this. We've got Equipment Reserve Fund resources of $2.7 million. That includes a $1.5 million transfer in to fund that. So capital equipment that we're looking to purchase in the projected 25 budget is $1.6 million worth of equipment. Some of that equipment is 2 dump trucks and dump beds to replace a couple 16-year-old trucks. That's $540,000. You can see we've got a triple axle trailer in there that's replacing one that's quite old. Some anti-icing tank, some tasers for our police department, 3 police vehicles, some body-worn in-car cameras for police, a new monument sign at the Merriam Community Center that will not only advertise or market our community center, but also the fact that the library is there. Library doesn't have any signage. They're not anticipating putting any signage, so we're going to put some signage up there. Then we've got some signage at Waterfall Park to better advertise the Julius McFarland soccer fields. We have a sign that's been down there for many, many years, but it is not branded like all of our other signs. It is more of like a metal sign. Metal, would you call it metal? Recycled plastic. Recycled plastic. There we go, even better. But we want to do a little bit better job of signage down there for the Julius McFarland Fields. We've got imaging camera for our fire department. Very cool tool. Got a chance to play with that, at least a new one when we went toward the OPFD training center. Some city door lock replacements, IT replacements for internal support, hoist for facilities, then some new employee furniture. We also build in a 5% inflationary allowance just because you don't ever know how much those things are going to cost. That all comes up to $1.6 million in your equipment reserve account. Your next one's your capital improvement fund. Again, this was the first fund. This is the first budget that we actually talked about, reviewed, and approved in April. $38 million in resources coming into that account, including the beginning balance. We've got $8.1 million in expenditures with an ending balance of $30.5 million. To be clear, the reason we have $30.5 million in balance is that we've been saving money to buy properties for the Creek project. We've been saving money for the Creek project so that we don't have to bond. It has been our, at least in past, it has been the council's prerogative to not want to borrow money if we don't have to. It made sense because of the rates for our community center. It also made sense that we could do it in 10 years and really save the taxpayers a lot of money in doing it that way. But that is the reason that we have that large balance there, is because we have large things that we need to purchase in the out years. I-35 TIF District Fund. This is a fund that we just last year really started being a little bit more open about. Council members and members of the public wanted to know more about this, so we made this a little bit more, it's its own slide now, so everybody knows what's going on with the TIF District Fund. We've got resources coming in of $6.6 million. The majority of those are going to be TIF receipts from property tax, $4.3 million in economic. Those are going to be TIF. Those are going to be incentives that we already have agreements through RDAs, so whether it's Merriam Grand Station or IKEA, that's where those funds come from, with an ending balance at the end of that year of $1.8 million. We do a transfer out in there. That transfer out is to go into the CIP to cover our underground utilities, because our underground utilities will be being paid with TIF funds. Your budget overview, this is all of your funds. So this is the summary sheet. I'm sure no one can read any of this. This is in your packet. It's in your budget book. This is all of the expenditures. This is the city budget. As far as statutory requirement goes, the state doesn't care if we spend $2,500 or $25,000 on paper clips and pencils. What they care is that we don't exceed the expenditure authority in any one of these particular budget line items in these funds. And again, if you wanted to tie all these out, you would be able to tie the bottom line of all of those to our budget form that was published on July 2nd. all of these numbers, 33 million, 3 million, 637, these are all the maximum expenditure authority lines that we have for each one of these funds via the authority of the state. So that's what ties the budget back together. And that being said, our budget calendar tonight, we've approved exceeding the revenue neutral rate. Staff is recommending a budget that has a mill rate set at 26.665. If we approve and adopt the budget tonight, it will be certified to the city clerk on Friday. I'm happy to answer any questions before I turn it over to the council president for the public hearing.
No questions from the council? Okay.
Dealing with it since April.
Pardon me?
We've been dealing with this since April.
Yes, we do know. We have seen it many times. All right. Given that, then we are going to have the public hearing for the 2025 budget. So again, before I call the public hearing, before I open the public hearing, I want to be able to say, people need to give me your name and address, and you have 5 minutes to talk. I now call the public hearing open. Yes, sir. Step forward.
Stephen Allen, 5031 Farley. I'm sure you're probably tired of me walking up here, and I'm tired of walking up here too. But number one, I had an issue in trying to get the detail on the budget. I was obviously going to the wrong websites because the information I got was the budget overview information, which is about 3 or 4 pages, and I wanted the details. So, yes. Yes. But from looking at the budget overview, it appears that your reserves, the ending fund balance reserves, is $2 million higher than the total expenditures for the budget year. I was under the impression that the primary reason for maintaining a reserve is to cover expenses if something happens, as we had with the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. So if I'm looking and reading this properly, there are a couple of $1 million there reflected in the budget that I don't think should be there, which then would lead to a lower mill levy. So that's the main thing I'm having an issue with here is the reserves as it relates to the amount of money expenditures that are planned to be spent. And I can't understand why it has to be so much higher. Unfortunately, as I said, I couldn't get the detail to discuss the other matters that I may have an interest in. So for that reason, as I indicated in an earlier conversation, I can perhaps understand a higher mill level than the levy rather than the revenue neutral one, but I don't think it should be as high as is being proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Billy Crone, 6633 Wed Street. One other thing I wanted to mention. In past years, there was a budget goal of containing budget growth, and I did not see that in the packet when I was reading it for tonight. It's hard to notice something that's not there, but I was expecting to see that somewhere. I didn't see it anywhere in the packet. I wish that containing the budget growth or controlling the growth of the budget was a objective for this next year. I just didn't see it written down anywhere.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during the public hearing? Seeing no one, I call the public hearing to a close. Council, have you heard anything that would bring forth a question that you would like to propose to Mr. Engel? All right. If not, I'm happy to entertain a motion. Yes, Ms. Godrich.
I move that the council approve a resolution to adopt the 2025 operating budget.
And a second, Mr. Silvers.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodridge.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, council.
Thank you. We seem to be getting to the close of the agenda.
We are.
So under council items, I have no items.
Correct.
And under staff, is there anything you would like to share?
From a finance report, I was going to share the finance report since I happen to be standing up here. Finance report, it was in your packet. If you look at it, you'll see that our revenues are flat, and really our revenues for the year are flat through the month of July because we had such a bad January. If you remember how cold it was, the world shut down for a couple days in January. If we took January out of the equation, we'd actually be up over $100,000 in revenue, but there's nothing we can do about that. Good thing is that our sales tax, auto sales are 1.2% higher, although we continue to see some decreases at Merriam Town Center. Merriam Town Center year-to-date is down 10% year over year, so that's somewhat concerning, but we will continue to keep an eye on that. The good thing, the light at the end of the tunnel is that we're $1.1 million under budget on the expenditure side. So while our revenues are flat, we have spent considerably less than we actually had in the budget. A lot of those things are things that we've just sat on because of the mill issue that we had last year. We said we'd defer some things, so we continue to just kind of keep an eye on those expenditures. So we are in a good place financially, despite the fact that our revenues are flat over last year. So, in last year was the high water mark. We are over 23, we're way over 22, way over 21 in terms of our revenues. So things are looking well. I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability.
Sorry, Merriam Town Center includes like IKEA and Quick Trip and Hobby
Merriam
Lobby.
Town Center would include the Johnson Drive retail.
So all of this right here. Okay, that's what I thought. I just had thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Mr. Dyer, can we have a community development update, please?
Real quick, I'll give you a more detailed update and counting of the grants for this year, but we are getting to the end of the grant season very much. We have spent almost all the $120,000 in the exterior grant program and rebating that funds back to residents who've done improvements to their homes. And then we've almost rebated all the $65,000 in the sustainability grant that you all had budgeted for this year. And then for the property tax rebate, we about $42,000 was back to residents for the property tax rebate. So, and the only thing I had to add is if you haven't seen it, I hope you have the large canopy of Merriam Grand Station. Please take your time to see it. It is very impressive, and it's going to be a great addition.
Can we go in yet?
No, you cannot. They had that well fenced off.
But
okay. Soon. They are, I will say they are making excellent progress over there. They really are right now doing really right on schedule.
But there are some businesses open.
Starbucks is open.
Starbucks.
I went to it and had a
supplement.
a latte.
Supplement Superstore. They are open.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
See questions.
Lots of questions. Go ahead, Mr.
Just
Silvers.
a couple of things. I visited the Starbucks and Supplement Superstore yesterday. Very exciting. And I actually got an unsolicited thank you from someone to council and city staff for making that whole thing happen. So that was really exciting. I also do want to mention to you that the gates were wide open yesterday and people were going into the construction site.
Yeah, that is, I'm sure, going to be troubling for the company, the construction company, because that is a huge liability on their end.
Okay. And, no? Okay. Anybody else have questions? No,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Council.
All right, the notes for the Public Art Committee were included in our packets. Are there other staff items, Mr. Engel?
I have no further updates, but I'm happy to answer any questions council may have.
Anyone? And no executive session, so I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Yodrich,
I move that we adjourn.
Mr. Silvers.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.